Go over and delete.
Awesome.
Mine's on April.
Let's get started.
Oh.
Let's dive into this. This will be a short and sweet one, guys. I think Tom just wanted me to go over kind of what the what changes we've reviewed so far. We've discovered at least one that was kind of hiding in there. Let me hide these controls real quick. Okay, so I wanted to kind of skip right to that first. You may or may not have seen it, but it is what's called a tail provision. And it was already provided for in the listing agreement. But the main problem was that it wasn't showing up anywhere on the MLS. So I think before in the listing agreements, it was pretty much just default, like 6 months after cancellation or expiration. If you could prove that you were the procuring, your marketing or your firm's marketing was the procuring cause for a buyer after that expiration, technically.
Melody's trying
Oh, thank you. Melody's trying to get in. Awesome. Technically, you were owed commission. Now, I want to ask anybody here or on Zoom, has anybody ever heard of an agent after actually going after a seller for commission on that tail provision? Anybody in Zoom? Anybody ever heard of it? Yeah. So that's where I'm at with it. This is one of those things where you know, on the buyer side, if you, especially if you've got a buyer representation agreement, if you, no, this is on the listing side. Sorry. If you get a full price offer that otherwise has no ridiculous contingencies on it and your sellers refuse it, technically you're owed a commission on that. Right. That's another provision in most listing agreements where I've never heard of anybody ever cashing in on that or trying to take their sellers to task for it. In that case, mostly because they're going to sell it down the road, unless they've been just super ridiculous and it's clear they don't actually want to sell it. But there is some mention in here in this legal bulletin 222 about the tail provision, which you will see in your listing input form now. So that's in form 1 for homes, form 5 for vacant land. I believe all of them, condo listings, all of those have a tail provision now, and you are required to fill it in. So if you're on Northwest MLS, filling out your listing information and you keep getting an error when you try to go live saying this isn't filled in, it's kind of like the leased land, right? They snuck that in earlier this year where you have to select yes or no whether it's leased land, which really,
all the ones with dots are required.
Yep. So this is another one of those with dots, and 6 months is the default. So
But on the actual contract, you don't have to, the blank in the parentheses after the blank, it does say if not filled in 180 days. So
That's right.
Standard verbiage, but you do have to, when you're uploading the listing, have to put
Yeah.
it in
so whereas before it was just part of the clause, there was no
there.
blank.
There wasn't.
It was
an
just part of the
additional thing
clause.
on that form 1 or whatever.
And they do, and we'll get into the frequently asked questions here in a bit, because that's one document I hadn't seen that Northwest MLS put up as the actual FAQ. It's long. I mean, this thing is long. It's 7 pages. But there are a lot of changes that I think we rightly so got so caught up in the buyer agreement and the way that buyer agents may or may not be compensated in the future, which of course was number 1 priority, but there were lots of other little things that we may have missed. So I've been going through this. The tail provision was the big thing, and mainly just because I've had a couple agents reach out to me. They've had some listings go live and they're like, what is a tail provision?
When I started putting in the form the form 1 before I saw it on the exclusive, and I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And they hadn't updated the FAQ or the manual on Northwest MLS yet.
Yeah.
For the new form. So I was like, okay, I'll just wait.
Yeah. And does anybody not know where to go in Express Forms to look at the manuals for the individual forms? Does anybody have a hard time finding that? If I go to this here, it's going to be on the member site, and you're just going to look for Express Forms. This is one thing I think probably for 6 months of being a member of Northwest MLS, I had no clue this was here, but these are all the blanks of every form we can possibly use. And in the case of form 1, for residential listings. You pull this up and you saw that off, well, pulled it up here. Let this load here. Okay, so that's going to be off to the right. So if you just want a blank, you'll get the one from the left, but the link over here on the right is the actual manual that you can use. And this will take you through all the definitions. It can be a little bit exhaustive, but see, that's like 6 pages of instructions there before you even get to the thing. But if you're ever wondering about a definition of something, if you're coming against something that just doesn't make sense, like a common interest community, this is one. All HOAs are common interest communities, but not all common interest communities are HOAs. That's clear as mud. If anybody needs any clarification on that, they list the actual RCW that this is, but if you click on the number, it'll take you to the actual definition, which I find helpful, right? So it basically includes, the most common example around here is going to be road maintenance agreements. If you're up a canyon on a road that the county does not maintain, and that parcel owner and several other parcel owners have kind of come together and recorded a road maintenance agreement with the county, that's technically a common interest community, right? They don't have an HOA there. They have nothing to state what kind of pitch the roofs should be or how high the fences should be, but they do have an agreement to maintain the road. That's a common interest community. You want to put that on there just because as a buyer's agent, you're going to look out for that. And that in your mind, if you're a buyer's agent and you see common interest community, should trigger the question, where are the documents, right? Because if it's not an HOA, but it is a common interest community, there should be some sort of recorded agreement.
Okay, but if it's just like a road maintenance agreement, there's a separate section on the form that allows you to put that in, so you wouldn't put it as a CIC, right?
You would do both. You would do both. That's my understanding of it, is anything that has an agreement, miscellaneous communities, right? So this is basically what they mean by that, is that's a community agreement. Shared water systems is another one, right? It's just one more piece that should trigger your kind
I
of.
thought that the verbiage, because it said common interest community, that it was specific to communities, actual
right,
communities, not specific agreements between one or two properties.
There are some around here that they insist on a crowbar separation there. So the one that sticks out in my mind, the most infamous one, is Valley High.
Yeah.
Up Fluid. If you ever list up Valley High, or you bring a buyer up there, if you say the words HOA or homeowners association, they will, even though they have a president, vice president, treasurer, secretary,
and they collect dues.
Yep, and they collect dues. They are not, because according to ongoing litigation, they cannot be an HOA because they tried to enforce the HOA on a bunch of properties that weren't a part of the original HOA. They took dues and stuff for years. So there's a whole thing up there.
It's
anyways,
similar to what's happening up at Yodeland too.
And Yodeland's interesting because they've got a whole like sewage hauling program, right? Like they've got a holding tank up there.
So yeah, so there's there are 3 divisions up there. Division 1 has been built on enough where they do have a community sewer system in that division, but the other 2, they have to be built on by 25 or 35% before they put in a community sewer system or connect to, but they just got their water rights after fighting for 10 years. Their water system's been in for over 10 years.
But they didn't have any rights.
Yeah, and then they're, depending on who you talk to, the HOA is either legal or illegal. So
probably depends on what division you're in, right?
Yes.
That's the issue up in Valley High is if Valley High were to call it an HOA, it would be legal for probably 75% of the properties up there. But the ones at the end of Valley High were not a part of the original. You'll find that there's a development up off of Sunny Slope called DD Hills.
Yeah.
The lower lots are all fine and dandy. Everybody gets along. There's an HOA there. The upper lots pay $400 a year for basically road access.
Yeah.
And they were all under the impression that they were also paying for power and water to get put up there.
Yeah.
And so they've been paying, at least one of the houses up there has been there for 2 years and has paid $800 towards what they thought they were getting. And they started getting past due bills from the PUD because their HOA actually wasn't paying into power and water. So that's something to watch out for. And that's with common interest communities. And that's not something that changed in October or at the beginning of this month. That's just something that's always been. But I did want to go over that. Let's see here. I did want to go through the frequently asked questions that they've got up. If you go to, the main member site, and look here, I've seen this jump around a bit, but Legal Bulletin 222, if you click on read more, it's going to give you a list of, well, no, you have to click the link first. I don't know why you have to click twice to get to this. It's just wonderful design, but you'll have these over on the side. This frequently asked questions box here at the bottom is very interesting. So these revisions, they go through and they just kind of ask a bunch of questions that people might ask. They don't just outright ask why, which is probably the number one question they get, is just, why are you doing this to us? But let's see, there was one towards the end that I found super interesting. Were there any outside factors that Northwest MLS considered? So they are considering things from the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission from as far back as June 2018. So this has been going on for a while. And I'm really grateful that they didn't push these changes through in 2018. Right? Yeah, they've been having this conversation for a while, the past several years. There's actually some changes that happened back in the 90s that have influenced some of this. Before there was an agency revision act that went out in the mid 90s that basically changed it so that the public facing perception of all the agents was that you, the agent, are the direct representative of your client. Now, legally, in some cases, you're still not. Your firm is, and you're considered a sub agent of that firm.
Like in our like here.
Yeah, like here in everywhere in Washington State, you're going to be considered a sub agent of your firm. However, for several reasons, that Agency Revision Act made it so that as far as the client is concerned and as far as the public facing is concerned, you are their agent. And some of the things in that act never really got put into practice until now. And so a lot of these changes about compensation, they've been coming down the pipeline for a long time. So that's one of the things I'm learning here, because I think
That's also why Northwest MLS did this now.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the country is gonna start doing this in a couple of years. They're actually using us as like they're like watching what we do to see how it plays out.
Yep. Which I, quite frankly, and I don't know if everybody agrees with this, but I would prefer to be ahead of it rather than scrambling to catch up to it. Right. So I wanted to open up. The main question I have is, has anybody had any real world interactions with these things where they've actually caused confusion, either with you and your clients or with other agents not using any of the new forms? You guys had any of those issues yet?
I just had to explain what the tail
provision
was on the
to a seller.
When we were going through it, but
yeah,
that was it. It's like they just changed it from a standard 6 months to now we get a write-in however long this is.
Okay. Is anybody not used buyer agency agreements prior to this? Raise your hand if you use buyer agency agreements. Okay, yeah, everybody. I was surprised, honestly, for my first probably 2 years in real estate. It was very much seen as a buzzkill that, you get buyers, and of course that's what they talked about this last 18 to 24 months worth of real estate was really, we were order takers, right? It was a speed-based market. It had to be quick. And part of being quick is getting people into homes, seeing them, and writing contracts before anybody else can, right? And so the buyer agency agreement for a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of, for the agents that I started out working with, it was very much seen as a hurdle that was maybe unnecessary. Right? And I think now that we're in more of a skills-based market and we're having, I don't want to say slower conversations, but it is.
Transparent.
We're having a lot of transparent conversations. Negotiation is just part of it now and not all of it, right? So you have time to position yourself. You have time to think about terms, not just price.
You know, you can throw your escalations or your contingencies back in there
Yep.
now.
Yep, there's room to protect your buyer. And I would say that I'm preaching to the choir here because you all use buyer agency agreements anyways, but buyer agency agreement is just one more way to protect your buyer. And they do, it's either in the frequently asked questions or in the actual bulletin, but they talk about how the agency agreement also outlines how to handle attorney fees, right? If your buyer elects to seek an attorney, it makes it clear what they're responsible for. And it also protects you, the agent, makes it clear that you're not responsible for paying their attorney fees. Because that can be a question, right? Especially after closing. If buyers have to hire an attorney to deal with something that the seller didn't disclose, all of that, it's just makes it much more clear, right? Without a buyer agency agreement, that's left wide open. Yeah. There's nothing legally obligating you to pay anybody's attorney fees, but there's also nothing legally absolving you from paying those fees.
And it's up to the judge at that point. Right?
Yep, it's up to the judge at that point, which can be expensive just to get a judge to say whether or not you owe it.
It works.
Not contract related, but if you go to Chipotle in the Chipotle app, any Chipotle fans? Anybody love Chipotle? I love Chipotle. If you order a single chicken taco, no,
4 people.
yeah, this is a big secret. So I'm letting you guys in on it. If you order a single chicken taco, and then you order an extra tortilla on the side, and you get everything on the side, right? So you just order a chicken taco with black beans or whatever you want on the side with an extra tortilla. It ends up being like $3, right?
$3.80.
$3.80 for like two tacos. It's a hack. It's a Chipotle hack. So
It's not on TikTok, it works.
Side.
yeah, it's a TikTok hack. Anyways,
And then you get 2 tacos.
if you have any questions about these contracts or Chipotle hacks, please reach out to me. Did anybody else have anything about these changes on October 3rd, or quite frankly, anything that I've mentioned or Tom has mentioned over the last several weeks? Is there anything that's kind of nagging in the back of your mind that seems unclear that we can try to clear up here? Anybody? Nope.
I
Good.
got one question.
Yeah, go for it.
Does the hack work with steak as well?
Yes. Yep. It works with steak as well. It works with they have I think they have a vegan filling too. So yeah, works with all tacos. No contract required. Just a simple bill of sale. Let's see. I did mention during the sales rally, speaking of creative financing, because we were getting into that in the sales rally. Has anybody ever used a Form 75? Has anybody ever used an option to buy? Is anybody curious about that?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. So if you ever want to find a form, if you know what the number is, you can type it in here, or if I know this is going to be an option is somewhere in the word, right? I can type it in and then I can search for it and it'll eventually load. So this is what I'm looking for here is option to buy real estate or lease to own. If you're ever looking for it and you just remember that it's lease to own, a lot of times I've seen people try to find it under rent to own. That will not show up, but lease to own does. So you put this in here. Let's take a look at it. It's really tiny print, so I'm going to zoom in here. This would go along with the purchase and sale agreement. And it can feel a little funny because oftentimes you're going to be setting this up as a lease to own over the course. It's similar to seller financing, where a lot of times sellers will carry it for 12 to 24 months, sometimes longer, but there's a higher risk the longer they carry the contract. But basically what you would do is set this up similar to seller financing, except that they are not transferring the deed at the time. And the reason this has come up recently is because we talk about assumable loans. FHA and VHA are assumable, right? So you can get people in on, if you've got a seller who originally got into their home under one of those programs, they can advertise their loan as assumable And I believe you can say low rate, you just can't say an actual rate. Otherwise, you have to go into the APR and all sorts of things. But you can advertise it as a low assumable FHA or VA, depending on what your seller has. But if you're talking to your sellers, that's one option. If your sellers have a conventional loan that has a due on sale clause that is going to make the assumable thing obsolete, this option to buy real estate at the time that you close on the deal and you get paid from their down payment, this does not trigger the due on sale clause. That's how I understand it. Again, not a loan officer, not an attorney. I'd highly recommend everybody dig into this further, but this relates to creative financing and the conversation you can have with your buyers and your sellers. If you've got a seller who's got a lot of equity, but it's a conventional loan, it's not assumable, and they can kind of get by having a renter in there for a while, this is a good conversation to have with sellers and potentially buyers who would not qualify for financing right now, but may qualify in a little while. What this does is it sets it up, and you can, if you've got sellers who have a big heart and really just want to make sure someone covers their mortgage for a couple of years until they can actually finance it, you can set it up to where this is unrelated to any lease between parties. And you can set this up to where if they got $2,000 a month in rent, all $2,000 that month goes towards their down payment in a couple of years. Right. So you can set this up at a future date and have them basically be making payments while renting. What you can also do is have it be a part of the lease between the buyer and seller. Right. So if they've already got a lease or they want to set it up to where they can rent at $2,000 a month, but their payments will actually be $2,500 and that extra $500 goes towards the down payment, they can set it up that way. You can set up your purchase price here and you can talk about the down payment. You can set a dollar amount in paragraph 5. You're supposed to have the legal description attached. And again, all of this is going to be attached to a Form 21 and all of your other addenda, right? That purchase and sale agreement's not actually going to go into effect until the date, the closing date that's set up here and on the purchase and sale agreement. So this is very long-term. It can be pretty complex, especially for, I mean, this is 3 pages long. But this is what they call an option. And in this case, it's most common with lenders, but there are some people who do what's called wholesaling. Options are related to that as well, where they'll have the option and then they'll actually sell off the option to buy the property. That's way in the weeds, so we won't get into that. But if you hear somebody talking about wholesaling, this option is related to that. You'll want to go over all of the usual title insurance, compensation. This is basically, this will be redundant. I think you'll pair this with a 41C. So if you're bringing the buyer, or a 47 if you're representing the seller, but you'll want to pair this with something that makes it abundantly clear what you get compensated for. I'm seeing here they actually mentioned that this is at closing of the sale. So if you wanted to get paid at mutual, I'm actually seeing this now and I have to walk back what I've said. According to this contract, you actually do get paid at the closing of the sale. So this is a very long-term thing, but I wanted to mention this because we've got all of these conversations happening around creative financing, but this all assumes that your buyers actually qualify for financing. A lot of us probably have buyers who are either new to their jobs, they make good money, they've got good credit, but they haven't been in the seat long enough. A lease to own option is one of them there.
Would this be like a first right of refusal situation if someone wanted to come in and buy the other property?
Yes,
buy the
this would set up a first right of refusal. So although in an option, I believe they are the only one who has the right to buy within the duration of that option. There's no bump clause that I'm aware of. I didn't see one within the language of this contract. So if you've got a seller that agrees to this, they essentially are on the hook to allow this person to buy within the time frame that they've set.
Right. So
And
they couldn't say, never mind, we want to
not
give you back your money.
Yeah.
And sell it to this person today.
They could, but they would have to rescind the offer, essentially. They'd have to go through the process of rescission if they wanted to then go ahead and list. I suppose they could list, but they would have to put it on there as a right of first refusal, and everybody who came to it would have to basically get in line.
Next question.
Yeah.
Is this strictly for residential real estate, or could you do an option to buy with land?
That's a good question. There is nothing so far that I've seen in the language of this. I actually had the same question that that is specific to residential. So I suppose you could do a lease to own on land. If you wanted to get in extremely cheap. Yeah.
Actually, I think you just might have saved this.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. This will need to be notarized because this is technically related to a lease, and any leases in Washington State have to be notarized. So there's an added layer of complexity on top of what is already complex. But if you've got somebody and this is their only option, you can go through it. The terms are fairly clear. Again, I was wrong about getting paid before it actually executes. So this is a long-term, but if you've got a buyer who otherwise would not be able to get in on anything and they're able to swing this and the sellers are agreeable to it,
And you're comfortable waiting to get paid?
this is a way to get paid in a while. But if it's somebody who wouldn't have otherwise purchased anything in the first place, something's better than nothing.
Well, yeah, that, and there's potential for future, right, and referral, and
Oh, yeah.
there's something to say for keeping that relationship versus.
Oh, yeah.
trying to get paid.
And it's a big, and you score big points with people. I mean, it should be clear through this contract that you're not getting paid up front, right? That I think that in item 11 in compensation makes that pretty clear. Should have read it better the first time, but yeah, that's form 775, lease to own. Any questions on that? All right, well, that is, I think that's it for me on contracts class today. We will have Tom back in the office with us, I believe, next week. I will confirm with him. I think he is going to, I believe we wanted to get into seller financing after we were done with all the items from Legal Bulletin 222. So stay tuned, but be looking forward to seller financing. Tom is going to take us through a masterclass on that. He's done quite a few seller finance deals in his time. A lot of them have been vacant land. So we'll walk through all of the intricacies of doing seller financing and feasibility and all of that. So look forward to seeing you guys there. And if there are no other questions, I'll see you guys later. Bye, Melody. Bye, Isaac. Bye, Kathy. Bye.